When Apple announced their new MacBooks, we set out to make the best, most comprehensive coverage anywhere on the internet, and we absolutely succeeded. And while doing so, we made some groundbreaking discoveries that nobody else mentioned or even tested. And at the end of the year, we finished off strong with the final comparison of 2021, and what I found in it really sealed the deal and made me regret my choice of a laptop. The 14-inch MacBook Pro with a 2TB SSD, 64 gigs of RAM, and an M1 Max processor. And in this video, I will tell you exactly why. Now, I know that we made an utterly insane amount of videos on these machines, so much so that I myself am sick of them, but you have to admit that these videos have and will help hundreds of thousands of people answer each and every question that they have and save money, many of them up to $1,000 or more. So it was well worth the effort. And for those of you guys who haven't watched the latest ones, I want to share with you our latest and final discoveries on the 14-inch MacBook Pros and why these are so limited compared to the 16-inch models despite Apple's marketing. I have to start out by making it very clear that the 14-inch MacBook Pros are incredible pieces of tech when compared to Windows machines in similar form factors, as well as the previous 13-inch MacBook Pros. So if you're set on this size, I don't think there is any other laptop out there that offers this mix of features, performance, and quality in this form factor, no matter how much money you spend. I know many people who purchased 13-inch MacBook Pros over the years, despite the performance being much weaker than the 15 and later on the 16-inch MacBooks, just because they love the form factor. In some cases, they were their mobile machines and they would come back to a full desktop, and for others, they would connect an eGPU to their MacBook and that would become their desktop with more performance. But as you guys know, the Apple Silicon chips don't support external graphics cards, so buying one with the right performance matters more now than ever before. And for the first time ever, you can buy the same exact specifications in a 14-inch MacBook as you can in a 16-inch model, all the way up to 8TB of SSD, which used to be capped at 2TB, and 64 GB of unified memory, along with 32 graphics cores and an M1 Max processor. Now, I've always been somebody that loved the smaller MacBook Pros, but I had to buy the larger models because I needed the extra CPU cores and the dedicated graphics. But finally, in 2021, I broke that cycle when I decided to finally ditch the large MacBook Pro and go with the 14-inch model. A part of that was the fact that I could get the same configuration, but the bigger thing was just how large and heavy the big MacBook Pros have gotten. When Apple moved from the 15-inch model that I really liked to the 16-inch, it got longer, wider, and slightly thicker, along with almost 10% heavier. But this year, with this redesign, it grew even more than the last time they changed it. And let me tell you, it was significant. So much so that it sealed the deal with me going with a 14-inch MacBook Pro, even though I figured that it would be slower because of thermals, and I knew that it had worse battery life. I just kept picking this one up and wanting to use it instead of the 16-inch model, especially when I was going somewhere. Well, now that it's been 2 months and I have used and traveled with the 14-inch MacBook Pro, and I have done way more testing and comparisons against other configurations, do I regret buying this 14-inch $4,100 MacBook Pro? Well, like I said earlier, yeah, a bit now, especially because of my most recent discovery that absolutely shocked me. Ever since our first 14 and 16-inch comparisons, we knew just how huge of a difference there was in the cooling systems of the smaller and larger new MacBooks. The difference is massive when you put them side by side. The fans look like they are almost twice the size on the 16-inch, and the same thing goes for the heat pipes and the fins where the hot air is exhausted. This of course makes sense since the 16-inch is a lot larger, thicker, and about 40% heavier as well. So if you think about it, it is actually very impressive that Apple managed or decided to allow such powerful chips like the M1 Max to be available in the 14-inch model. But if you've been following us for at least a few years, you will know that there is such a thing as going too far, where a more expensive, faster chip will actually run slower than a cheaper and slower chip because of thermal throttling. throttling. Now on the inside, we also found that the 14-inch has much smaller speakers than the 16-inch, where at Apple's event, they said that you get the same exact shockingly good speaker system in both. Well, I guess you technically kind of do, since both of them now have 6 speakers with dedicated woofers, but after using them side by side, I can easily say that the 16-inch system is clearly far better than the 14-inch. With that said, the 14-inch beats out most, if not all, 15 and 16-inch Windows laptops in sound quality, but the 16-inch has such deep bass that I'm still routinely surprised by just how crazy it sounds with that low bass that is kind of unbelievable that it's coming from a laptop. It takes movie watching and music listening to a whole nother level that was impossible before, so after using it and then using my 14-inch, I just know how much better the sound quality is and what I am missing, and it makes me wish that I decided to lug around the larger model. Now before I get deep into performance, I want to talk about travel. We recently went on a trip and I took my $4,100 14-inch MacBook Pro along with me. The size was amazing since it fits in any backpack or messenger bag, and it fit perfectly on the airplane's tray table when I was doing some video editing. I have to be honest and say that I'm really glad that I didn't have a 16-inch laptop. It is just too large, especially if the person in front of you decides to lean back, causing you to have to change the angle of the screen to something that is almost unusable, which I've had that happen in the past with a previous 16-inch that was actually smaller than the current new model. The 14-inch is the perfect size for those of you guys that travel and also need good performance. Now, as far as battery life on the other hand, well, it wasn't great. Since I was pushing the machine pretty hard doing video editing, the battery was draining fairly fast. Noticeably quicker than any 13-inch MacBook Pro and MacBook Air that I've used to travel in the past. Now, as you guys know, we have done some battery life comparisons between different configurations, and there is a startling difference, and I want to give you guys the latest update. I use the same test as Luke Miani, which is using GFX Bench to push the systems pretty hard, simulating really real-world tough testing, while at the same time being able to keep it consistent so we can actually compare instead of actually just sitting there doing video editing, which can give you varied results. After just 45 minutes, my 32-core 14-inch dropped down to 52% battery life, 12% lower than the 24-core model, while not actually having that much more performance due to thermal throttling. Now the 24-core scales well in terms of performance from going from a 16-inch, but it only drops about 8% battery, which is quite interesting how well optimized that model is. Of course, it also runs hotter since its fans have to work harder to cool it down, which also drains more battery, whereas the 16-core model runs cooler and has much better battery, but of course less performance, so tasks can take longer. Jumping to the 16-inch MacBooks, with the same test, the 32-core had 64% battery left, so 12% more than the 14-inch. But what that doesn't show you is the fact that the 16-inch is much more powerful as well, being about 30% faster in tough GPU tasks, which is a huge performance increase. And even though it uses more power and it runs the GPU at the full 1300 megahertz instead of about 1000 megahertz or so for this task, or even lower if it's thermal throttling more, the battery life is still much better. Now, of course, you can hook up a nice portable battery pack to juice up your 14-inch and supplement its battery that is about 40% smaller than the 16-inch, and that is exactly what I did on the airplane. In regular daily use, one thing you can't do is get the extra performance difference back. I know some of you guys told me to manually preset the fans higher to cool down the 14-inch, and I did try that, but it really doesn't make any difference. The system still heats up just as fast, and for the brief time that it runs cool, Apple still artificially limits the graphics to a maximum of 1100 megahertz instead of the full 1300 megahertz on the 16-inch. What really got me though is when I did my ultimate GPU comparison and I pushed the machines hard, and the $2,500 base 16-inch MacBook Pro performed practically the same as my $4,100 14-inch that has double the graphics cores and 4 times the memory. And not only that, that 16-inch model also ran much cooler and almost silent, whereas this 14-inch was blasting its fans at full blast. This really sealed the deal for me, just knowing that my expensive 14-inch MacBook Pro is the worst value new MacBook Pro that is out there. Now, I knew that it would thermal throttle and it would have worse battery, but not by this much. And after a few months of testing it and using it, knowing just how much better the 16-inch MacBook Pros are, it is really a bummer that Apple's 14-inch is limited both thermally because it's smaller, as well as artificially because Apple is locking down the graphics performance even if you're plugged into power and your system is running cool. It is crazy that the 16-inch base model can even outperform it in some tough cases. I really think that Apple should give this 14-inch the high power mode that the 16-inch MacBook Pro has, because that is actually useful for this machine, allowing it to reach its full performance if your battery is good and the system isn't already preheated up and running really hot and thermal throttling. Now, at this point, while I really like the 14-inch form factor, I'm going to try to get over that extra size and weight just because I know how much of a better value the 16-inch model is, costing just $200 more, but giving you more value, better thermals, quieter fans, better performance overall, and way better battery life as well. And you can actually save money and get a weaker spec, but overall have better performance than using a 14-inch machine. So overall, do I regret getting this expensive 14-inch? I think so, and I think if I got maybe the 24 core, even more of the base model, it provides a way better value and a much more optimized system as far as the performance in the form factor compared to this 32 core M1 Max. You guys let me know your opinions. If you're somebody that bought a maxed out 14-inch, what has your experience been like? And did you expect it to be slower than a much cheaper 16-inch? So I just want to get all that latest info out there for you guys that didn't watch the latest comparisons. It really is a shocker, and it's some stuff that nobody really talks about or even tested, so I'm glad that we could do that for you guys. Go ahead and click that circle above to subscribe and help us reach our goal of 1 million subscribers. We would greatly appreciate it, and check out one of those great videos right over there. This has been Max, and I will see you in the next video.